We're either going to follow older brother issues, we're going to live in the center of Father's love, or we're going to follow younger brother issues. And it was 1995. Bob Mumford did a wonderful tape. As soon as I read the title, I said, I got to listen to that. Sex and the Anointing. You put sex in the title, people are going to read it or listen to it. And in the title, Sex and the Anointing, he's talking about the present move of God and how wonderful it is, but he brings it right back to all the past moves of God in the last 500 years, and he brought it down to the sexual immorality that has killed moves of God over and over and over again through the last several hundred years. And he brought it down scientifically that the portion of the brain where sexual passions and desires are is the same portion of the brain where passion for God flows. So when there's a move of revival, there's a move of God pouring his inheritance upon the church and blessing and blessing, blessing. That passion flows in the same realm to where sexual passions are, and so sexual desires are heightened. And if you're not living your life to receive Father's love and pour it into your family, you start drifting off center, and you find yourself suddenly in relationships you never thought would happen. And you don't know it all. It's not all put into public view. But those of us that have ministry to hurting and wounded people, it has been unbelievable immorality among renewal leaders for the last 7 years. Many of them are gone that were so used of God in the first 1 or 2 years of life. And it's not stopped, it's continuing. In the next few weeks, you will see a whole new wave of things beginning to be published and put in newspapers and magazines about the fall of some of the greatest religious leaders of this past decade. Why? Our value system. We started that out Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. You were created as a gift of love. First receiving love. But if you're not receiving it in order to be sent as a representative of love to your family, drift begins. And sooner or later you find yourself now finding the need for passion that you have no longer being met in Father's love. You're beginning to find it met in your ministry, older brother. You're beginning to find it met in somehow relationships with others. You don't feel as warm. You don't feel as free in your relationship at home with your spouse, with your children. And then you find yourself in verse 14 at a time where it seems like the inheritance that God gave you is gone. Renewal's over. Renewal's over. Oh, when I hear that, guess what I know? Because it's not been over and over with me. With me, I continually live in a sense of the presence of the Father. It's not always a warm, fuzzy thing, no. But I'm constantly hearing the voice of the Father say, Jack, you're my son, in whom I'm well pleased. And it's bringing transformation to my marriage. It's bringing transformation in all of my relationships. It's bringing transformation even to many of your lives. Because I'm living in the center, crying out. Always there? Oh, we'll learn tonight. Not always there. But drive of my life, receiving love and giving it away. And then renewal is sustained in your life. But see, he came to the point to where he had consumed the blessings of the Father upon his own lust, and the inheritance was gone, empty. And a severe famine began to occur in that country, and he began to be in need. And he went and attached himself to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he was longing to fill his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving him anything to him. Here we find a need beginning to occur in his life. Remember what happens as soon as you drift off center of the Father's love. Your single greatest need is receiving love. Once you just drift off center, now you have a need that's unmet. And an unmet need does what? Makes you sick. Every relationship in your life begins to become unhealthy. With God, with yourself and how you feel about yourself, with your spouse, with others. And so you start gradually moving into a place of defilement where no young Jewish boy ever would find himself. He would never find himself among a pig, eating pigs, entertaining pigs, feeding pigs upon a pig farm, complete defilement. In the place, in the thing he said, I'll never touch that. Now what's he find himself in? And all the ministers, 50% will end in divorce in North America, 40% will end in affairs, and I guarantee you, every one of them would say, I never planned on doing that. I thought everything was going to go fine. Everyone that's ended in a moral situation said, I thought it would be everybody else and not me. And now in renewal, it's rampant everywhere. Immorality, right in renewal. And every one of them would say, I never planned on it happening to me. But you find yourself to where it seems like your need is no longer being met. And then what do you find yourself surrounded by? Foreigners. Foreigners who are not concerned with meeting your need, they're concerned with getting their need met. Other people with unhealthy relationships, born again, spirit-filled, say all the right religious things. But when you get around one another, it just feels warm and fuzzy, and they just understand me more than my spouse does. Mm-hmm. And some of the ladies out here thinking, oh, I wished my husband knew the things that Jack knows. You just put a wall of division between you and your husband by comparing your spouse to me, and you've opened a door to a spirit of a Jezebel into your marriage relationship, a spirit of without habitation, without cohabitation, and you've just put a wall of division between you and your spouse with those thoughts. Of course, the men's thoughts are different. In the pig pen of defilement, with the place of dissatisfaction, the place where no one's needing our need, so we're constantly looking to others, and foreigners are right there ready to come into our life. And yet just a few years or a few months earlier, we were right in the midst of the center of Father's love, dwelling in his house, God moving awesomely in our life, God meeting our need, God providing for us, and then we don't know how it happened. We didn't discern our drift. And where do you find yourself? Remember? It all began valuing the Father for what he could do for him. What happened to the prodigal in these last 3 verses we read? He comes to a place to where now one needs meeting his need, but everybody's using him. He's now at a place to where everybody, the foreigners in his life, value him for what he can do for them, yet none of them are giving him anything. Do you see how sowing and reaping results? One of the things, every pastor, every minister that comes to us for ministry, or should say 9 out of 10, don't want to use an absolute, one of the things we hear over and over again is, I have no one meeting my need. 70% of pastors, people in ministry, have no one to talk to, do not have a close friend, have no close relationship in their life. They don't have accountability, they don't have counselors in their life, and over they come up and I say, I don't have anyone in my life. I just find myself giving, and nobody putting into my life. And I immediately know who drifted. I know their value system. They have valued the Father for building a ministry, not for intimacy and love. And because these ministers have valued God for what he could do for them in anointing and gifting and building a ministry so they could be seen, be heard, drift started and they didn't know it. But they find themselves surrounded now by people who just suck them dry, take. They're dry. They find themselves in all types of fantasy relationships. They find themselves now in unpure bonding to others. They find themselves being drawn to others within their church staffs, others within their congregation in unhealthy ways. And no one's meeting them in need, and it is all the fruit that has occurred from valuing the Father for what he could do for you more than intimacy and love.